What can Matt Painter prove in 2025?
You are Locked On Boilermakers, your daily podcast on the Purdue Boilermakers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Boilermakers here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your host, Nick Arvin. I write about Purdue for 24/7 Sports, and I've got a jam-packed episode today. We're going to be talking about what can Matt Painter prove in 2025. We'll have Knox Rives on the show talking that week 2 football matchup against the Southern Illinois Salukis. And finally, we'll wrap it up with some news around West Lafayette today. What's happening around Boilermakers training camp? What are some other things that have come out? But we're going to go ahead and get right into it today. We're going to go ahead and get started with Matt Painter. What can Matt Painter prove in 2025? And before I get into this, I want to explain a little bit more by what I mean when I say, what can Matt Painter prove? Because I want to go ahead and say, I think that Matt Painter is the best coach in the nation when it comes to developing players, specifically guards, to succeed, whether that's a Carson Edwards, whether that's a Jaden Ivey, or we see that at the center spot with Zach Edey. He is so talented at recruiting guys that fit his system and developing them to become great players that really show out for Purdue and lead to Purdue success. And that's been something that's been consistent for Purdue under Matt Painter. That's why the Boilermakers have been good every single year, almost, it feels like, under Matt Painter. And it all comes down to his ability to develop these players. When you talk about legacy of a head coach, when you talk about where these coaches kind of stand up compared to each other, there are two tiers. So when you think about the top 6-7 coaches in the nation right now, you think about a Rick Pitino, who won head coach of the year for turning St. John's around, and he's a coach with a national championship ring. You think about a guy like Danny Hurley, who brought UConn to back-to-back national championships. But you also think about guys like a Matt Painter. You think about guys like Bruce Pearl, guys like Kelvin Sampson, who haven't been able to win a national championship. And when you think about what can jump these coaches up from good to great, from great to GOAT, at the college basketball level, it comes down to winning that national championship. And that goes for Kelvin Sampson, that goes for a Bruce Pearl, and that also goes for Matt Painter. When I think about Matt Painter, like I said, I think about that talent developer. I think about the motivator that Matt Painter is. And I'm not trying to take away anything from Matt Painter's legacy. I know that he's one of the greatest coaches in the country right now. I would say that he's top 5 easily alongside some of those guys that I just named. But when you think about Matt Painter, what he means to Purdue and his legacy overall, that national championship is so vitally important to building that legacy for Matt Painter and for building the narrative of what people think about him, because he's shown success in recent years. He's brought Purdue to 6 Sweet 16 since 2017, and he brought them to a Final Four just a couple years ago. That makes him, if you get rid of Matt Painter, everything we know about Matt Painter, who he is as a head coach, that resume, what he's been able to do with this program over the last 9 years or whatever, that shows that he's one of the best coaches in the nation. But that national championship means so much to your legacy as a head coach. And this year is probably Painter's best opportunity to do it. You bring all these guys back. You bring back a Braden Smith, a Fletcher Lawyer. You bring back a TKR. You add a guy like Omir Meyer. You add a guy like Oscar Clough. These are additions. These are being able to retain these players and add guys through the portal, whether that's recruiting or, like I said, in the portal. That is so good for building chemistry of a team, for building a championship contender team, when you're able to have the best of both worlds. We heard Pitino talk earlier in the week about, hey, I'm not even going to recruit high school kids anymore. I'm just going to focus on the transfer portal, because in this time of college basketball, that's all that matters. And Matt Painter says, hey, you know what you're doing, Rick. You have 2 national championships, but for me, for my program, I'm going to throw a bit of a hybrid concept in there. And we see how good this roster is this year. And we see that Purdue is the national championship favorites for a reason. It's because of what Matt Painter's been able to do, building that roster, developing these players, and obtaining the talent to put on the court that gives you the best chance to win. And I'm not saying that should be discredited for Matt Painter. I know what Matt Painter has done for this university. I know how great of a head coach he is, but when you look at his legacy, when you look at a guy like Dan Hurley, when you look at a guy like Pitino, even an Izzo, who I think that Painter has proven to be a better head coach than Izzo in recent years, but when you're talking about from a legacy standpoint, Izzo does have that national championship, and that's something that Matt Painter needs to obtain. And I'm not saying it has to happen this year. I'm not calling for Matt Painter's job by any stretch of the imagination. But Matt Painter deserves to be in the greatest coaches of all time conversation. What he's done at Purdue has been extraordinary. He's built the Boilermakers into a powerhouse. He's built them into a team that has a chance at making a deep run in March every single year. And there's been criticism on whether he can get it done in March. And to an extent, it's been warranted, but he's proven that his team has the talent to go make a run every single year. And there have been teams in the past, whether that's a UConn, Danny Hurley's team, that beat that Zach Edey-led team in the national championship. That was a great team. Or if you run into a Houston led by Kelvin Sampson last year, that's a great team with great coaching. But Matt Painter is also a great coach who can put a great team on the court year after year. And that's what makes him such a great head coach. That's what makes Purdue contenders year after year. And that's what makes this team so special. When you think about who Matt Painter is as a head coach, when you think about the benefits he brings to this university and what he prides himself on, I feel like this team this year is a summary of what Matt Painter is, what he wants to be, and the teams he wants to build. This is the year for Matt Painter. This is the year to prove that he's a national championship winning head coach. And this is the year to prove that he belongs in the conversations with the greats of the game from that coaching perspective. Legacy probably isn't that important to Matt Painter. But for me, I know that Painter deserves more respect than he gets for what he's done for this university and for the caliber of coach that he is. Matt Painter could retire tomorrow, and he would be a legend for Purdue fans. He'd be a legend in the college basketball sphere. But when you talk about winning a ring, winning a national championship, no one can take that away. Unless you're Rick Pitino, but nobody can take that away. You win a ring, and you're immortalized. Painter will be immortalized at Purdue either way. But he deserves to be right next to a Pitino in conversations. He deserves to be next to a Hurley in conversations. And this is the year that he proves that he belongs right next to those guys. And this is the year that he proves he's a national championship winning coach. We'll talk a little bit about some football action. We got 12 guests till kickoff still going on this week. We're just starting up week 2 coverage going on here in our next segment. We talked to Knox Rives, FCS expert, about the Southern Illinois Salukis, how they're going to be and what Purdue can expect going into that week 2 matchup. And we'll have that here for you next. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason is already heating up, and college football isn't far behind. Whether you got your eyes on the big-name quarterbacks or breakout running backs, Prize Picks makes it easy to get you in the game. So far, using Prize Picks, I've been so impressed with how simple it is. You can go 2 players to 6 players, build up your lineup, and find success. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 off in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, run your game. If you're trying to stay on top of your routine, whether that's workouts, long days on campus, or staying focused through back to back classes, hydration is where it all starts. And that's where Drip Drop comes in. Drip Drop is doctor developed and scientifically proven for fast hydration. It uses the perfect balance of sodium electrolytes and glucose to help your body absorb fluids quickly, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of a leading sports drink. My favorite flavor is that grape. I go to it every time I have an option to get a hold of some Drip Drop. And right now, Drip Drop is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. Just head to dripdrop.com and use promo code Locked On College. That's dripdrop.com, promo code Locked On College for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard. The 12 days of guests here on Locked On Boilermakers continues here today on Tuesday, where I got our guy, Knox Rives. You can catch him on the radio. You can catch him on the road. He's on the road right now covering these FCS games. He knows all about FCS football, and he's going to talk some Salukis today ahead of Purdue's Week 2 matchup. Knox, thank you for joining the show. How are you doing today? How are those Salukis looking?
Dude, I'm doing fantastic. First off, I want to say I appreciate you having me on. You do fantastic work. I've seen a lot of the show. I saw you pick Purdue to upset USC the other day, so I'm going to really keep you on that hot take. That's a little crazy, but we'll talk about that later. For now, we'll talk about Southern Illinois. When you look at the grand landscape of the FCS, Southern Illinois is one of those blue blood programs that has a lot of history to it. A lot of people that are Purdue fans are going to look at the 4-8 record last season, and they're going to say, okay, easy FCS opener. That is far from the truth with the Salukis. They were injured to all crap. They had 4-8, and they have a fantastic conference that they play in, so it's fantastic. Last season, their last game of the season, they had a quarterback who made a start, who started the year as a graduate assistant, and they had so many injuries at quarterback that they had to activate the graduate assistant on the roster for his last year of eligibility. He ended up winning that game and throwing like 5 touchdown passes. So absolutely insane. And the FCS knows it too, because they were ranked number 20 in the preseason poll for the FCS. So that is a fantastic program in Southern Illinois, down in Carbondale, Illinois. The year before last, they were the second round of the playoffs with an 8-5 record. They had 2 ranked FCS wins and an FBS win over Northern Illinois. They always play them. That's a big border rivalry with Northern and Southern Illinois. They're usually a very physical team up front. They will throw the ball occasionally when they have a good quarterback, but their identity is smash mouth football. They have a lot of really good running backs. They've got really a stable 3 or 4 deep that they can really go with, and their O-line is always very good. They've got a very good offensive line coach up there. And also, when you're talking about their conference and just the strength of schedule they play, for those that watch FBS football and don't see a lot of FCS people, think of the SEC on steroids. That is the Missouri Valley Conference, which Southern Illinois plays in. And, Nick, I want you to really appreciate this stat that I found for you. 12 of the last 14 national champions in FCS football are from the Missouri Valley. Last year, they had 6 of the 24 teams in the postseason for the FCS, and that's a low number for them. Sometimes they have anywhere from 7 to 9. One year, they had 10 teams in the conference, and they only have 10 teams. So think about that. That's how ridiculous that is. In the FCS stats performed preseason All-American teams, the Missouri Valley had 24 selections collectively. So the Missouri Valley is an absolute gauntlet. When you're talking about players defensively, they're led by linebacker Colin Bohanek. He's a preseason third-team All-American, an absolute ball hawk at middle linebacker. Had a season-ending injury last year. We talked about how banged up they were last year and how that really affected their season. Last year, he, in week 2, had a season-ending injury against Austin Peay. The year before that, 62 tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 8 sacks for the linebacker, an absolute threat off the edge. And when you're talking about the offense, it's led by none other than quarterback DJ Williams, who is an absolutely electric player with the football in his hands. He's a big dual threat kind of guy. I watched it myself. I called Austin Peay and Southern Illinois on ESPN Plus last year, and before he got hurt, the next week, he tore us up. He started the first 3 games before having a season-ending injury in the 4th game. He already had 571 yards on 70% completion, 4 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Also had 39 rushes for 242 yards and 4 touchdowns in only 3 games. And that includes an FBS game against BYU. So an absolutely fantastic quarterback is DJ Williams. Before his time as a Saluki, he was the Ohio Valley Conference Freshman of the Year with Murray State. in 2021, passed for 1,000 yards and rushed for 500 with 10 total touchdowns for DJ Williams. So when you're looking offensively, that's the man you need to stop for the Salukis.
Absolutely. So we talk about how powerful that MVC conference is, how prestigious that conference is. When you look at a team like SIU, everyone kind of thinks, hey, North Dakota State, that's the powerhouse over here. Could you give me a Big Ten comparison for kind of who SIU is, what that program is, and compare that to a Big Ten school?
Well, that's a great question. And honestly, I appreciate you asking it. When you're talking about comparisons between the Big Ten and SIU, I would give you not recently, but I would give you a Michigan State, who they're not going to be fantastic every year, but most years they're going to be very competitive, and you'll have a few where they are absolutely fantastic. About every 2 or 3 years, they're going to be really competing for a playoff spot for national championships. So that's the comparison I'd give you. Obviously, as of late, both of them have had their struggles, but that Michigan State would be the comparison I would give you in the Big Ten.
So this offseason, we've seen a new head coach for Purdue, a reloaded roster with 50-plus transfers brought in. So there will be a bit of an adjustment period, week 1 against Ball State, week 2 going against Southern Illinois. Both those games are at home. So when you look at it, when you look at what Southern Illinois brings, obviously difficult for an FCS opponent to be competitive against a Power 5 team.
Trust me, I know.
Especially on the road. But where are some spots that SIU is strong? We talked about that running game. Is that somewhere that they may give the Boilermakers a little bit of trouble? Is there anywhere on that roster, anywhere that they really excel that can make life difficult for the Boilermakers?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think offensively, I really like the new coach Purdue brought in. I like the run-heavy style of offense that he's going to bring. I'm always one that's going to say, you better run the dang ball. So I'm all against my offensive philosophy. It's probably a reason why I'm not a coach, but anyways, I always love coaches that come in and run the ball. But I will say, offensively for Purdue, I think you're going to be fine. You're going to have the size mismatch for a Power 5 to an FCS school. Even a very good FCS school, you're always going to have that size mismatch. The defensive line is where you can take some advantages. But I will say the offensive line, and specifically the option game with DJ Williams, is probably going to give Purdue a little bit of trouble. The option game is where DJ Williams absolutely is fantastic. Like I said, they've got a stable of running backs that can go and they can rotate quick. They've got a great offensive line. So being able to read blocks and making Purdue make one-on-one tackles on the option all day, that is the key to Southern Illinois' success. If Purdue can rally and keep him under control and make sure that the second guy or the third guy may make the tackle, even if he gets him down after a few yards, keeping him under containment and not letting him allow for those electric 10, 15, 20-yard runs, or maybe even farther than that, that's going to be where Southern Illinois has their strength, and that's probably where that ball game is going to be decided.
Yeah, sounds very similar to kind of what Barry Odom's trying to bring over to Purdue, that kind of philosophy that he wants to build over here. Last question for you today, Knox. Who are some guys, you talked about DJ Williams, but who are a few more guys on that roster to look out for in the ever-changing landscape of college football? There's guys transferring in and out from FCS to FBS. There's always guys moving around. I'm not saying SIU isn't a desirable place to play, but looking at this game, looking at players on the field, looking at players that could potentially go into the transfer portal, who are some guys to look at in SIU, some guys looking at going forward from that program?
Well, tell you what, I think as a whole, and this is not to discredit FBS football at all, I think FCS football might be one of the most underrated just honestly underrated brands of football. I mean, you've got a lot of guys that you're watching on Sundays have come from the FCS. I feel like North Dakota State pops out an offensive lineman to the NFL every single year, you know what I'm saying? And especially some of those guys like Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp is from Eastern Washington. So, he's a fantastic player. Those guys are going to be absolutely fantastic. Now, I'll tell you what, the one guy offensively, receiving-wise, that will give you trouble, Tay Moreo Jr., wears number 0 for Southern Illinois, is a transfer from the College of Charleston. Didn't play much last year, had a preseason injury where he didn't get to play. He's only 5'10", 187, not a big guy, but an absolute speedster on the outside for the Salukis and can really make you hurt if you're not on top of the coverage. So Tay Moreo would be a name that I would watch out for against the Boilermakers.
Absolutely. We heard it here. Tay Moreo from our guy. Thank you again, Knox, for coming on. We've got more guests every day on the show, every day until kickoff. We'll have someone covering USC tomorrow, week 3, going on Wednesday. That'll be a full episode headed for you guys. Thank you again for coming on, Knox. I appreciate your time. Is there anything finally you'd like to note about those Salukis going into week 2?
The only thing I will say is I know obviously you're going to go into it with the mindset of it being an FCS game and it being a win. Don't be so quick to discount those Salukis, especially if it's a close game early, because they have a big history of making those difficult for those FBS teams.
All right. I appreciate you, Knox. You travel safe. Thank you for joining the show. I know that you're a very, very busy man. We appreciate. If you're running a business, every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you needed a service. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on. That's why you need Open Phone, so you never miss an opportunity to connect with your customers. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system designated to streamline and scale your customer communications. Do you juggle 2 phones just to keep business and personal calls separate? Well, Open Phone solved that instantly. See why over 60,000 businesses trust Open Phone. They're offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedoncollege. That's openphone.com/lockedoncollege. They'll even port over your existing numbers for free. Open Phone. No missed calls, no missed customers. Huge thank you once again to Knox Rives for coming on the show, talking Salukis with us here. And just as a reminder, we got a new guest coming from every program all the way up until kickoff week 1 against Ball State. For this last segment, I want to talk about some news that's been going on around West Lafayette surrounding the Boilermakers. And the first thing I want to talk about, not necessarily surrounding the Boilermakers as a whole, but RJ Young of Fox Sports. He released his annual ultimate 136 college football team rankings. And a lot of people have said some of the rankings on this list are questionable, which happens when you rank every team in college football like Mr. Young did. But I wanted to talk about some notable teams that where he put them and just some interesting things that I noticed looking over his rankings. So we're going to start off. Purdue came in at number 99, which is 99 out of 136. So not great. One of the worst teams in the Power 5, or Power 4 rather, is what Mr. Young of Fox Sports expects Purdue to be. And I understand 1-11 last year, but you bring in Barry Odom and people need to pay attention to that. And something that makes me realize that Mr. Young wasn't paying attention to Barry Odom, to the hiring of Barry Odom at Purdue, is the fact that he has UNLV ranked higher than Purdue. He has UNLV ranked at number 72, 27 spots higher than the Purdue Boilermakers, which is absolutely insane to me that you have a team in the Mountain West that just lost a large amount of their starters to Purdue, that jumped along with Barry Odom in the transfer portal. You lose your head coach who turns that program around to back-to-back bowl wins for the first time in history at UNLV. So we see how special he was to that program, how special the players he had on the field were at UNLV. And then you rank UNLV 27 spots above what Purdue's going to be this year. That's absolutely insane to me. Something else that's notable, Purdue's week 1 opponent, Ball State, goes in at 134 out of 136 college football teams. So if we know anything from Mr. Young, we know that Ball State is not expected to be very good this year. But we all kind of knew that. We know that they're rebuilding. We know that they have a new head coach, kind of like Purdue. So you can't expect instant results the first year, but that's pretty telling. When you look at Purdue's a 17-point favorite for that week 1 matchup, you look at Ball State is estimated to be one of the lesser teams in the MAC conference, one of the worst teams record-wise last year, and then expected maybe not take a jump year 1. We'll see what happens over there in Muncie, Indiana. But if you factor Ball State is at the low end of the MAC, Purdue is a 17-point favorite. What's the high end of the MAC? And RJ Young says Toledo is the high end of the MAC. He puts Toledo in at 75, a MAC team cracking the top 75, 24 spots above Purdue. And then also Miami, Ohio, the second highest MAC team, comes in at 92, 7 spots above Purdue. So we know what RJ Young thinks over at Fox Sports. We know that he thinks Purdue's not going to be very good. And according to his rankings, he thinks 2 MAC teams can beat Purdue. I don't know what that means, if we should hold any weight to these rankings at all, because as I've said on the show, you can say what you want about Purdue preseason. You can say what you want about how this team fares up after a disastrous season last year. But what you have to realize is that the games are played on the field for a reason. Barry Odom is going to prove that his team is better than a lot of these analysts believe this year. And he's going to take his team to heights that we haven't seen the last 2 years under Ryan Walters. And a big part of that is going to be, who do we have at that quarterback position? And we may gotten some answers today. Not great answers, because quarterback coach Darren Henshaw didn't necessarily want to give reporters much today at practice. After the scrimmage Saturday, that was said to really supposed to be a resolution to some of these position battles. We should get some clarity in the depth chart about who these ones are going to be following that scrimmage Saturday. And so far at the quarterback position, Barry Odom is actually the guy who's given us the most answers. We saw that Ryan Browne kind of cycled in with the ones today, and that's the first time that we've really seen one of these quarterbacks, whether that's a Bennett Meredith, whether that's a Malachi Singleton, or whether that's a Ryan Browne. Browne and Singleton have really been seen as the front runners. That's who I have expected to be the front runners throughout this quarterback battle, so to speak. But Browne steps up today after that scrimmage. We see Browne start taking reps with the ones. And when asked, Barry Odom says he expects that to kind of continue going into the last couple weeks of camp, going into week 1 against Ball State. So the quarterback coach may have not given us many answers. He says, we're focused on building a group. And the fact that both of these guys, or all of these guys, as he said, have really been playing up to a level, they've really been showing talent, is the reason why there is still a quarterback competition. But when we see what Barry Odom says, when we see what he wants, putting Ryan Browne in with the ones, really cycling him in and announcing, hey, this is kind of going to be the practice schedule going forward into week 1. We know that Ryan Browne's going to be taking those starter reps. And that leads me to believe that although an announcement has not been made yet, Ryan Browne is the front runner for this starting quarterback job going into week 1 against Ball State. And we'll talk about that a little bit more going into these final couple weeks. We're going to keep having all these guests on. We're talking quarterback battles, we're talking position battles, and we're talking matchups all the way down Purdue's schedule. We'll still have some basketball content on here for you guys these next couple weeks, but as always, thank you guys for making Locked On Boilermakers your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Brian Smith on the Portal Show. Brian has the late rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you guys again. As you guys may know, we're trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by kickoff. I know it's a lofty goal, but you guys can do it. Thank you again for joining us on Locked On Boilermakers. And as always, boiler up, hammer down.